Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be building the STX225. This is another budget 5-inch kit that sits at around $112, so it's competing with the Tyro and the Tero, so let's see if it's any good. Starting off with the frame, I'm taking these small screws and I'm putting the nylon standoffs onto the sandwich plate. This is because it's quite difficult to get at these once everything is in place. So those are all on. Now you're given these press nuts for the arms to fit through, and you're given these screws that just about reach them. There's no need to press them fully in yet, but that's all of those in for the arms. Now there's individual ESCs on this one, so I'm cutting the motor wires short, and they are a silicone wire, so good quality. The motor's a 2204 here with 2300 kV, so the smallest out of all of these budget kits that have come out. I'm just tinning those up there. And then these are the BL-Halley 32-bit ESCs, so you could say the premium part of this kit. So just tinning those up there. And it doesn't really matter what order you do this in, but I'm screwing the motors in. You're just given two of these 2.5mm screws, so make sure they're in really tight. So yeah, just two screws on there. And then I'm putting some electrical tape over the top because the pads of the ESCs could touch the carbon and short out. And then I am soldering up the ESCs straight. So this is a Hakko soldering iron that I'm using here. You need to do that for all of them, of course, so I won't bore you with that, but they are directional, the motor, so pay attention to that. Next, I'm tinning up the XT60 connector, which is already cut to length, and the flight controller slash PDB is unusual. I'm tinning up where the XT60 connector goes, but it's underneath, and now I'm bridging the VBAT here for the VTX, and then I'm bridging the 5 volt for the camera. It's also underneath, so difficult to get at. So now I'm soldering in the positive and the negative for the XT60 connector. And this doesn't have smart audio, but I was trying it anyway. So this is the TX6, and then I'm going to tin up the rest of the solder pad. So yeah, it's a power distribution board as well. So yeah, the VTX has got something on it called Smart, so I thought I'd try it even though it's not advertised as that. So just tinning everything up here, and for the signal, now there's a bridge here for the 5 volt or 3 volt, and there's a bridge here as well for S-bus or uninverted, RX one I think, uninverted, and the other one is P/S I think, so that's a close-up of it there. And then this is the PDB going over the top of the standoffs. I'm now cutting the ESC wires to length, so it's a bit more involved, this build, and also cutting the signal in the ground and then stripping those. Now, if I'd have planned this better, the positive and the negative is switched around, so you might want to pay attention to that, but of course I can just cross them over. So I'm just tinning everything up here. And then that is the positive going in. Careful you don't bridge anything, and that's the signal, and that's the ground, and then I put the other ground on top of there as well for the signal wire. So that's all of those in. It takes quite a while to get that done. And then you're given this plastic part, so I'm measuring up the VTX wire so that it reaches the pads. Then I am stripping those. So the wire for the smart audio is actually a separate wire that I already have, so I sort of depinned it and then plugged it in later. So that's the video going in there, that is the VBAT, and then that is the ground, and then the camera wire is just long enough, so don't cut it too short, but I'm just stripping those. All silicone wires, this, by the way. Tinning that up. The camera is the same as the Tero, unfortunately, so not great quality. So that's the ground going in for the camera. That is the video, and then that is the 5 volt. You can see it just about reaches the front. So now I'm taking my tester grips and I'm going to flash the firmware to the XM Plus, so that is the signal, the ground, and the VBAT. I've already put the firmware onto the micro SD card of the Tyrannus, so this is to flash the XM Plus with the FCC version of the firmware and also the RSSI on channel 8. and I can bind it at this point as well. So once that's finished writing, you can turn on the external RF while pressing down the button, and then you can go and bind it with the telemetry off. Make sure you've got no pulses on for your model setup so that we can get the failsafe correctly. But once that is bound, I can exit out of there, turn the Tyrannus off, and when I turn it back on, I will get a green light. So next I'm going to set a model up. I'm going to go over to the mixer, and on channel 5 I just call this A for arm. I'm going to select my switch. I usually select a 2-position switch there. And then on channel 6 I'm going to go for M, which is mode. I don't bother typing mode out because I'm lazy, so yeah, just put M in there, and then I select a 3-position switch for that one, and then exit out of there. And then I do a final one on channel 7. That is B for buzzer. It's going to have to be D-shot commands with this one though, because you're not given a buzzer. So I'm going to do that, and that's going to go on this 3-position switch there, and then I can exit out of that. So I'm going to use some pins on my receiver, so I'm just going to solder those in, and I'm going to need my own receiver wire there. So just cut in those short, and with the XM Plus you're not given heat shrink anymore, so that's my own heat shrink, and just using a candle lighter to shrink that down. So this is my own servo wire. I'm just measuring it up and then cutting it to length, and then stripping those wires just with some wire cutters, and then those need to be tinned up, of course, as well. And I'm soldering them in on the other side so that everything is neat. So we've got the signal, the voltage, and then the ground. And then I'm putting the standoffs over the top. So you're given 2 sets of standoffs, one slightly shorter than the other, so I put the longer ones on top. Then using one of the included cable ties to put the VTX on the top there and just secure that in place. Then you're given some nuts, nylon nuts, to go over the top of there. So that's all of those that have gone in there. Pretty neat. Then I'm plugging in the smart audio wire, but spoiler alert, it doesn't work. It might be Betaflight that's doing that. I need to figure it out. But yeah, couldn't get the smart audio working. So this is the camera plate, and yeah, frame not as good as the Tero. Had to file it down. Make sure you do that outside and in water. This is just to show you. And then I'm using some screws to screw in the camera. I had to use my own screws. They weren't long enough, the ones out of the box, which is a shame. And then we've got these slightly longer screws here for the standoffs. The standoffs are pretty good quality. Yeah, it was just that camera plate that didn't quite fit. So yeah, that's all of the standoffs going in. So screw underneath, and then you've got 4 of those that go in there. Make sure you tighten everything up. I quite like this for the XT60 connector there, just gets it out of the way. And then I'm plugging in this antenna here. It's a short antenna. I'm plugging the camera in and then fitting that into place once it's filed down. So this is the top plate going in. You're given 4 shorter screws for that, and the camera also clips into the top plate as well, which is why you have to file it down. And yeah, I'm using a 2mm hex driver for all of that to go in. I'm using my own cable ties for the antennas and my own heat shrink. You are given a load of cable ties in the package, just my heat shrink doesn't fit around them, so I used my own. And these are the cable ties you're given in the package, so I used them to hold down the ESCs. I think you're given about 8 in total, which isn't bad really. So then I'm just going to cut all of those off there using some wire cutters, and I'm going to do a continuity test. So we should just get a little chirp as the capacitors charge up, but we should not get a constant beep. Otherwise that would be a short. So you are given a silicon battery mat, which is nice, but it does cover up the holes for the standoff, so be careful with that. And you're given a nice grippy battery strap, so I'm putting that in place. It also comes with these spinners on the motors, but they give you some lock-in nuts, so I'm going to replace all of those. I've also moved the antenna through the hole in the top plate because it was just flopping around at the back and there was no decent way to secure it. And finally, I'm just going to tighten everything up. So this is the screws going into the press nuts. It does take a few turns to get it to grip into the carbon, so make sure these are fully tight, otherwise the arms can move. And of course, make sure the motor screws are tight as well. You might want to use some Loctite with there just being two, but I've never had a problem just having two, and that is the build complete.